Before Thunderbolts crashes into theaters, let's be real. Most of us haven't thought about half of this team since Phase 4 started limping to the finish line. Between characters pulled from forgotten spin-offs to Disney Plus deep cuts, and one or two you probably thought were dead, this lineup is anything but simple. And just to stir the pot even more, Marvel's throwing in a totally new wild card, Sentry. A character we haven't seen yet in the MCU, but one with powers that can make even the Hulk nervous. So whether you need a full recap or just a reminder of who's who and why Bucky Barnes is suddenly chilling with a bunch of government experiments, here's everything you actually need to know before Marvel's anti-Avengers take the stage. Starting off with the focus of the movie, Yelena Belova. She was born in the Soviet Union somewhere in 1988 to 1989. It's a little bit unclear. But when she was 3 years old, she was assigned by Dreykov to play the role of the daughter of Alexi Shostakov and Yelena Belova, with Natasha Romanoff playing her older sister. They then moved to the United States to Mount Vernon, Ohio, on a Soviet espionage assignment. But due to her young age, she actually was unaware of the assignment and believed her fake family to be legitimate. And at the end of this mission, once it was over, after they were chased by government officials, she was sent back to the Red Room and was separated from her fake family. And then flash forward to 2016, Yelena was sent to Morocco on an assignment with a team of widows to retrieve a substance known as red dust. A substance that could break the mind control that kept the widows all under Dreykov's order and rule. The team managed to locate the target holding the cure, a former widow named Oksana. Oksana managed to evade them, but eventually she was caught by Yelena, and Yelena ended up killing Oksana. However, not before Oksana managed to use the red dust to free Yelena. Yelena, now freed from the mind control, cut her tracker out and sent the dust to her adoptive sister, Natasha, who we know as Black Widow, thinking that because she is an Avenger, she would have more resources than Yelena. Together, with the help of their adoptive parents, Yelena and Natasha destroyed the Red Room and freed many widows from the Red Room's control. After splitting from Natasha, Yelena continued to free widows from the Red Room's control. However, Thanos complicated things a bit. Yelena was a victim of the blip and came back and found out that her sister was dead. She then abandoned her mission of freeing other Black Widows and met with Valentina Allegra Defante, who we'll get to towards the end of the video, and was given an assignment to hunt down Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye. But she needed very little convincing, as she believed that it was Clint's fault that Natasha, her sister, was dead. She then headed to New York, where she encountered Clint and Kate Bishop. Clint and Kate caught Yelena completely off guard, as she did not expect Clint to be working with someone, and the continued interference of Maya Lopez, aka Echo, added even more complications to the situation. Yelena ended up going back to Kate's apartment to find out why Kate would risk her life for Clint. And this started a pretty unlikely friendship that was honestly been one of the highlights of Phase 4. And after a lot of back and forth between the two, Kate pointed out that the person who hired Yelena may have some ulterior motives for wanting an Avenger dead, and Yelena warned Kate that if Kate would get in her way again, she wouldn't hesitate to kill her. The conversation with Kate did make Yelena curious, and she found out that Kate's mother, Eleanor Bishop, was the one who hired her, and that Eleanor had been meeting with Kingpin. However, none of this deterred Yelena's drive to kill Clint. They ended up confronting each other, and Clint did his best to convince her that he did not kill Nat, and that she sacrificed herself to save everyone and to save Clint. It did take a bit to convince Yelena, but it wasn't until Clint did the whistle that Yelena and Nat used to do when they were kids that she stopped and let Clint live. Yelena is a master assassin who has been trained in martial arts, espionage, and various weaponry as well as acrobatics. She is a full-blown Black Widow. I think everything that Natasha can do, Yelena can absolutely do. And some of her go-to weapons are the Black Widow batons, the Widow's Bite, which immobilizes its target, as well as various firearms and knives. Next, we have a character we haven't seen in over 7 years, and I wouldn't be shocked if many of you guys forgot who this is. We now have Ghost. As a child, Ava Starr grew up in Argentina as the daughter of Catherine and Ava Starr. She witnessed the fallout of her father's relationship with Hank Pym, who kicked him out of S.H.I.E.L.D. and smeared his name within the scientific community. Embittered by this, Elias continued to research quantum energy on his own, despite the risks. When an experiment involving the quantum tunnel went wrong, Ava ran, trying to ensure that her father did not die alone. But the tunnel ruptured before she reached him, killing both of her parents and flooding her with quantum energy. When the fire department arrived, they were unable to touch her as she seemed to become intangible from the accident. She was then placed into an orphanage and later met with her father's ex-colleague, Bill Foster. Foster encouraged her to focus on her powers and eventually allowing her to solidify and pick up objects. Foster promised to find a cure for her condition and began to act as her surrogate father and developed a quantum chamber to allow Ava to briefly stabilize and ease her pain. Observing the potential asset her powers could become, S.H.I.E.L.D. took Ava and began to train her in espionage so she could go on missions to take down threats that proved too difficult for normal operatives. They developed the Ghost suit for her to harness her abilities, granting her the option to slip between intangible and solid states, and promising to help find a cure for her. Over the course of her time in the field, as well as the prolonged suffering caused by her quantum displacement, she became hardened and extremely vicious. When S.H.I.E.L.D. collapsed, Ava was taken back in by Bill Foster, who began to assist her in researching for a cure as her condition started to deteriorate. She believed that her cure for her could be found in the quantum realm, and she tried to steal tech from Hope Van Dyne and Scott Lang, aka the current Wasp and Ant-Man. She did successfully steal the mobile laboratory and the component that could be used to stabilize the quantum tunnel. However, Hank Pym was able to track down his stolen lab, and there was another confrontation in which Ava knocked out the three of them and imprisoned them. Ava and Foster explained to the trio that their goal was to extract Janet Van Dyne's quantum energy that she'd been absorbing for the last 30 years so that Ava could survive. Of course, everyone refused to help, as it was a possibility that Janet could die in the process. Ava was running out of time, as Foster told her that the current quantum energy chamber could barely help stabilize her molecules and that she only had a few weeks left. Ant-Man, the Wasp, and Hank all escaped and took the lab with them, and Ghost was getting desperate. At this point, some time has passed and she had just days left to live. With the heroes setting up the quantum tunnel, Hank went in to rescue his wife Janet, and Foster told Ava that if Janet would return, she would be able to help her, as the process to extract the energy would actually kill Janet. Ava, of course, ignored this and started to extract Janet's energy from the tunnel, and she did start to become whole again. However, she was thwarted and Ava's body began to fall apart. However, Janet, now being in our world, calmed her down and told her that she felt her pain. Janet apologized for her sickness and told Ava that she could fix it. Janet transferred a portion of her quantum energy into her, making her feel whole again and letting her actually touch Janet. The team then focused on helping Ava in her condition. However, they were all snapped away by Thanos. And since then, we've not really heard from her. She was mentioned briefly in Secret Invasion as her DNA was part of the harvest, but we don't know when her DNA was actually taken. Her powers are that of a quantum mutation, which allows her to partially break the laws of physics in a way that she is still affected by gravity since she does have mass, and her entire state allows her to phase through things and move faster when she's in phase. She can generate zero friction and resistance. Then, when she returns to her physical state with full force and mass, it enhances her strength. She can even render herself invisible and has enhanced durability. And not to mention, she is a trained field agent to top it all off. And as I mentioned, Yelena's father is Alexi Shostakov, who is the Red Guardian. He's also going to be appearing in this movie. During the Cold War, Alexei joined the Soviet Armed Forces and was the sole recipient of their recreated super soldier serum. Acting as Red Guardian, the Soviet counterpart to Captain America, he was deployed on numerous missions and soon won the acclaim of the Soviet public, getting legions of fans, having action figures made. He was a celebrity. He was essentially what Captain America was before the USSR. During his military career, he encountered General Dreykov, who runs the Red Room, and became his friend and his right-hand man in the process. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in December of 1991, he found himself no longer operating in combat missions as Red Guardian and had his uniform taken from him. In 1992, he was assigned by Dreykov to go undercover in the US in order to infiltrate the North Institute in Ohio, which was a front for S.H.I.E.L.D., which itself was deeply infiltrated by the fascist organization Hydra, which we'll get to a little bit later. He did end up accepting this mission, and it was not going to be as action-packed as he was used to, but assigned to it were 3 people that would act as his family. Veteran Black Widow Yelena Vostokov, and Black Widows in training, Natasha Romanoff and Yelena Belova. Over the years, the 4 became very close with each other. Alexi and Yelena did develop genuine feelings for each other, while Natasha and Yelena did form a sisterly bond and did view their fake parents as their actual parents. After that Ohio mission and sometime later, Alexei and Dreykov had a bit of a falling out, resulting in Dreykov having him imprisoned in the 7th Circle prison in Russia. There, he languished for decades into anger, self-pity, and reminiscing about his glory days, with his only solace in regaling his fellow prisoners with war stories, some of which have questionable authenticity. And in 2016, with the help of his 2 adoptive daughters, he was able to escape from the prison and was recruited to help take down Dreykov in the Red Room. Alexei was subjected to the Soviet Union's recreated super soldier serum, which enhanced his physical abilities to superhuman levels. Again, think Captain America. He's an expert in hand-to-hand combat, as well as an expert marksman and an expert spy. He did work with the Red Room for quite a while and did pick up a lot of their skills. His go-to weaponry is his Red Guardian shield that is very similar to Captain America's shield, as well as a firearm. Next, we have perhaps the longest segment in this video. We have the Winter Soldier. James Buchanan Barnes was born on March 10th, 1917, and was the eldest child of 4. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Bucky enlisted and was accepted into the U.S. Army in the 107th Infantry Regiment. And in 1943, Bucky and his division was captured by Hydra, and he was a test subject of Arnim Zola and his super soldier experiments. Later that same year, he was saved by Captain America, his best friend Steve Rogers, and together with other prisoners of war, they destroyed that base, and when they returned to camp, Bucky, Steve, and some of the other prisoners that were rescued formed the Howling Commandos, and they took down several other Hydra bases. At the beginning of 1945, Bucky, Captain America, and the rest of the Howling Commandos prepared a mission to board a train carrying Arnim Zola, with the aim of capturing him to learn about the Red Skull's plans. Bucky, Cap, and Gabe Jones used a zip wire to board the train as it traveled through the mountains. Jones did end up staying on the top of the train, and Bucky and Cap entered and began exploring the various carriages of the train. Moments after their arrival, they were suddenly split up and ambushed by a team of armored Hydra soldiers sent to kill them by Zola. This sadly did not go well for the duo. As the fight went on, a hole was blasted in the side of the train, and a Hydra soldier shot Bucky, and he flew out of the train and grabbed a rail on the outside, before eventually falling to his presumed death. However, due to his enhanced physiology granted to him by the super soldier serum, Barnes was able to survive the fall from the train, although his left arm was torn from his body upon impact. His nearly lifeless body was discovered by a Soviet soldier, who dragged him back to a Soviet prisoner of war camp, where he remained until Arnim Zola was released from SSR's custody. Barnes became the first subject of the Winter Soldier program. Removing the remnants of his severed arm, doctors replaced his missing limb with a prosthetic one. In order to erase his memories and remold him to their liking, Hydra used a memory-suppressing machine to perform electroconvulsive therapy, which inflicted serious damage to the part of Barnes' brain, which controlled memory and executive functions. Bucky lost access to his memories prior to the experiments and became hyper-aware of his environment and was highly susceptible to commands. With his body at beyond the peak of physical perfection and his arm at the highest level of weaponized technology, Barnes was put to use as Hydra's personal weapon, for many years. They kept him frozen in suspended animation between missions to prevent him from aging and offset the healing factor of his serum. Whenever Bucky completed a mission, Hydra had his mind painfully wiped to ensure he remained memory-free and emotionless to those he killed. From then on, the Winter Soldier did many assignments for Hydra, including the murder of Tony Stark's parents in 1991. Flash forward to 2014, he was activated to kill the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, who's getting too close to discovering Hydra's secret existence inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. He seemingly killed Fury in Steve Rogers' apartment, and Cap ended up chasing him down and realizing that the Winter Soldier is his long-thought dead friend, Bucky. With Cap's interference, the Winter Soldier was given new targets: Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, and Captain America, Steve Rogers. In carrying out his mission, he fights both of the targets in Washington, D.C., and during his fight with Cap tries to remind Bucky of who he is. And after this fight, when Bucky goes back for reconditioning, he says that he thought he knew the man on the bridge. And then, of course, Hydra did wipe his memories and he's back in his Winter Soldier state. Just before Hydra could complete their goal to rid the world of all potential threats to their reign with Project Insight, Captain America and his allies had infiltrated the Triskelion and revealed Hydra's presence to everyone at S.H.I.E.L.D. And in order to stop this from continuing, Alexander Pierce, who was leading Hydra at this point from within S.H.I.E.L.D., activated the Winter Soldier. As the two stood opposite of each other, Captain America pleaded with his former friend for him to try to remember him, think of all the innocent people who were going to die. Despite everything Captain America said, Bucky still remained silent and ignored all of these pleas. At the end of the battle, the helicarrier began to fall apart in midair due to the other helicarriers firing upon it, and the Winter Soldier became trapped under all of the falling debris. Captain America quickly leapt to his friend's aid and freed him by lifting the debris off of him. And taking a moment, the Winter Soldier listened to Captain America as he insisted that he knew him. Begging Barnes to remember their time together, Rogers reminded him of his name, his past, that he had known him for his entire life, that he had been captured by Hydra and had been turned into their own assassin. As Bucky ignored Cap's words and insisted he was only his mission, he started brutally beating Captain America into submission before Steve then quoted something that Bucky said to him 70 years ago after his mother's funeral. As Bucky finally began to remember, he stopped, unwilling to throw another punch. However, before Bucky could do anything, the floor fell beneath him and Rogers plummeted down into the river below. Realizing that Steve was his only true friend, Bucky dove into the water after him and pulled him to shore, saving his friend's life. He then later went to the Smithsonian Institution as he found a memorial for the late Howling Commando James Barnes, who had seemingly been killed in his first combat during World War II. Flash forward to Civil War in 2016. While walking through Bucharest and buying plums from a street seller, Bucky caught sight of a nervous man staring at him. Fearing that his identity might be at risk of being discovered, he walked over to the man, who ran as fast as they could to get away from him. Taking the newspaper the man was selling, Bucky discovered that he was being accused of the bombing of Vienna International Center within Austria, which had claimed the lives of several people, including King T'Chaka of Wakanda. Seeing this, Bucky decided to collect all of his belongings and leave. Upon returning to his hideout, Bucky discovered that Captain America was already there. And when Steve asked Bucky if he knew who he was, Bucky claimed that he learned of him inside a museum, although Steve knew he was lying. Bucky had still insisted that he was not responsible for all the terrorist attacks and that he was not the Winter Soldier anymore. Captain America did note that the people who did blame him were currently coming to their location right now and intended to finally kill him. And just as Captain America said, their reunion would be cut short by the arrival of GSG-9 agents, who charged into the building from the rooftop and the hallway. In the end, they were all arrested by GSG-9 with the help of Black Panther. And with Bucky now in custody, he was greeted by a man who was supposed to be the psychiatrist Theo Brossard. who had been appointed by the UN to conduct a psychological evaluation of Bucky. The real Broussard, in fact, had been met at a train station and been taken to a hotel and murdered by Helmut Zemo, who's now impersonating him. Zemo set off a blackout that cut all the security cameras and began reciting the trigger words that would reactivate Barnes' Winter Soldier program training by using the Winter Soldier book that was originally owned by Vasily Karpov. Not wanting to be forced to kill again, Bucky gathered all of his strength and attempted to break free of his restraints and stop Zemo. However, Zemo was able to finish saying the code words just as Barnes broke free and went into his compliant assassin mode. Zemo's first question was about his mission in 1991, where he assassinated Tony Stark's parents in order to steal a super soldier serum. Zemo demanded to know the location of the Hydra Siberian facility so he could unleash the other Winter Soldiers. Bucky was then ordered by Zemo to fight and kill anyone who attempted to stop him before escaping in a helicopter, seemingly proving his guilt of the recent terrorist attacks. After fighting several other heroes, Bucky made it to the helipad where he was stopped by Captain America and Bucky was knocked unconscious. With Bucky in his right mind again, Cap formed a team to go find Zemo and they clashed with Iron Man's opposing team. Cap and Bucky did get away thanks to Black Widow, and they traveled to Siberia to find Baron Zemo. Iron Man quickly followed them, and the three of them confronted Zemo, who then revealed that Bucky killed Tony Stark's parents. This started a fight in which Bucky and Cap beat Iron Man and then left. With nowhere left to go, Black Panther offered sanctuary to Bucky in Wakanda to help him heal and sort through everything. Bucky and Steve were told by T'Challa that Barnes would have to return to cryosleep stasis to have a better chance of finally having his Winter Soldier programming removed. And by 2018, Barnes had been released from his cryostasis chamber and he found himself in Wakandan forest in order to see if Shuri's deprogramming permanently removed the Winter Soldier program that turned him into a ruthless killer. When the trigger words were said, although it did give Barnes some immense stress, he was finally free, and those words would no longer turn him into a brainwashed assassin. Bucky did take part of the fight in Infinity War in Wakanda, where they ultimately lost against Thanos, and Bucky was blipped for 5 years. And at the end of Endgame, after Thanos had been defeated, Bucky says goodbye to his best friend Steve Rogers, knowing that Steve had no intention of returning to the present day after returning the Infinity Stones. When he saw old Steve Rogers and that the shield was passing to Sam Wilson, he accepted it and agreed that it was the correct move. Returning to the United States, Bucky was offered a deal by the federal government wherein they would pardon him for his actions as the Winter Soldier under the conditions he would undergo their court-mandated therapy sessions to treat his PTSD. Wishing to atone from his past, Bucky compiled a list of names in a notebook, consisting of the individuals whom he wished to seek closure with. Bucky still had a long way to go with his therapy, and after making some amends, he started to feel a little bit better about himself. After finding out that Sam Wilson, the Falcon, gave up Captain America's shield and let John Walker become the next Captain America, they got into a heated argument in which Sam brought up that there were bigger issues to deal with, such as this new terrorist group called the Flag Smashers. The two decided to team up on a mission, and after returning to the States from said mission, they decided to see Baron Zemo in regards to the Flag Smashers. After Bucky orchestrated a prison break that allowed Zemo to escape, and with Zemo's help, they managed to find out more about the Flag Smashers, and they went on a trek that led them across the globe. After John Walker's partner, Battlestar, was killed, Walker absolutely lost it and tried to kill the person who killed Battlestar. Bucky and Falcon ended up confronting him after the incident, and they briefly fought, where Bucky was able to take the shield from Walker and dropped it next to Sam. Together, Bucky and Sam, as the new Captain America, stopped the Flag Smashers, and Bucky came to terms with his past and everything he has done. Now in 2026, Barnes has decided to get into politics, and he ran for U.S. Congress, and it looks like he may actually win if we're going off the trailers of the Thunderbolts. Bucky has all of his physical abilities enhanced through Hydra's super soldier serum, and his go-to weaponry are firearms as well as a cybernetic arm. He's a master assassin, and he's been trained in martial arts as well as many forms of weaponry. And that's the first half of the Thunderbolts lineup. Yelena, Red Guardian, Ghost, and of course the Winter Soldier himself. A mix of assassins, super soldiers, and survivors with a whole lot of trauma and even more unresolved issues. But we're just getting started. In part 2, we'll break down the rest of the team, including US Agent, Taskmaster, and the arrival of Marvel's most dangerous wildcard yet, Sentry. Trust me, it only gets messier from here.